there's two items that are in the news right now that are very much related, and I will tell you about them. One of them I completely understand, and the other, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I can guarantee you it's related. Right now, here's the context. Donald Trump met with Russian President Putin in Alaska. It was a very successful meeting. They're trying to wrap up the Ukraine war. And just a couple days ago, just yesterday, Russian President Putin was speaking at the Vladivostok Economic Forum, which is a big forum that they have. It's a big, gathering where they talk about investment and raising up living standards in the Russian Far East in Siberia. And at that meeting, Putin says he's meeting with Alaskan companies to discuss the joint ventures that they're going to have, which would mean the sanctions are going to be lifted. Like, it looks like things are moving ahead. And North Korea is part of that. North Korea is Russia's close ally. North Korea is right there next to the Russian Far East. North Korea was very well represented at the Vladivostok Economic Forum. And meanwhile, the South Korean president met with Donald Trump at the White House. And Donald Trump expressed concerns about some of the persecution of different churches that is going on in South Korea. And Trump said, I am going to meet with Kim Jong-un. It's going to happen. We're going to have another meeting. And the South Korean president said he supported it. Now, that's the context you have to understand, right? And all of this is being fought like crazy, tooth and nail, by the deep state. And Tulsi Gabbard just gave a great speech about the deep state, about people within the CIA and the intelligence agencies who believe they're above the Constitution. John Bolton just had his home raided by the FBI. It appears that he was selling U.S. state secrets to NATO countries. It's not clear if he's actually guilty. That's what he's accused of. And there's a fight going on in the deep state, a huge fight going on in the deep state right now, as Trump, it appears, is going to start getting along better with Russia and possibly North Korea. So what happened? Well, there was a big parade in Beijing to celebrate the victory over fascism in Japan in World War II. And U.S. media, usually they just tend to ignore that kind of thing. They decided to show it on TV and use it against Donald Trump. And the New York Times ran an article. I don't know if you saw this. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea see their moment. They're mad as hell about the possibility that we might have improved relations with Russia and North Korea. And they're furious about it. And they're also furious that Tulsi Gabbard has been stripping the neocons of their security clearances. And they're also furious that John Bolton got his home raided by the FBI. So out of the blue, the New York Times, ta-da, it reveals something. It publishes a news item about something that happened in North Korea in 2019. Now, I don't think this is necessarily fake news. I think there's a very good chance this actually happened. But I don't know if you saw this. This is just a big revelation that in 2019, a group of Navy SEALs were sent to North Korea with some kind of electronic device that was going to try to monitor Kim Jong-un's communications while he was negotiating with the United States, right? That I guess the United States wanted to monitor Kim Jong-un while they were negotiating with him to make sure that he was telling them the truth in the negotiations or whatever. That's not cool, right? That's a violation of North Korea's territorial integrity. They didn't ask North Korea's permission. It's wrong, right? But that kind of thing happens, right? I mean, if you think that the USA isn't spying on Venezuela and Russia and China and all that, and, these countries also, respond. This is the murky world of intelligence, right? So obviously I don't agree with Trump having done that and sent these Navy SEALs to North Korea to try and monitor Kim Jong-un's communications during the peace talks. I don't doubt that such a thing might happen. Not saying that the New York Times is telling the truth. They could have just made the whole thing up. But regardless, apparently some Navy SEALs went to drop off this surveillance device in North Korea. And some fishing boats of North Koreans saw them. And the story is the Navy SEALs thought that they were soldiers from North Korea. So they unloaded, their weapons on them. Turns out they were civilians. And it was a complete disaster. A group of Navy SEALs tried to get a surveillance device to North Korea. and they failed to deliver the surveillance device, and they killed like 11 Venezuelan, or I'm sorry, North Korean civilians. Well, that's horrible, right? And I mean, it's absolutely awful. That's an act of aggression by the United States against North Korea, a country that the USA has been at war with since the 1950s. It's wrong, and I have no reason to believe that this is necessarily a false story. Now, it's not confirmed, right? This is one of those leaks that they get. Why are we talking about this now? Why? Why are we talking about this now? Why in the world, right? It's 2019 is when this supposedly happened. It's 2025. Why didn't we talk about this when Biden was in office? Why are we not talking about, why didn't we talk about it at the time it happened? Why in the world are they bringing it up now? Because it appears that there could be possibility of North Korea and the United States having peace talks. And the New York Times is against it. They're against it. In case you didn't notice, right? The New York Times is against it. They're furious. They're writing about Trump is allowing North Korea and Russia and Iran to take over the world. Blah, blah. They're trying to sabotage the talks, right? It's obvious. Now, did this actually happen? It's possible. I think there's a good chance it did happen. I can't guarantee it, right? The New York Times does print fake news, and especially these leaks that they get, right? Don't always happen to be true. But if it happened, do you think North Korea didn't notice? Do you think North Korea wouldn't notice a bunch of, their own people getting gunned down by US Navy SEALs? I think North Korea knew about it. And North Korea didn't publicize it for a reason, right? North Korea wanted to continue the peace talks, and North Korea chose not to publicize it at the time. I think North Korea, to be a country that's been at war the way they've been at war for this long, if there's a foreign ship that gets into a shootout with one of your fishing boats off the coast of your country, you know about it, right? North Korea keeps an eye on its coast. And so North Korea knew about it. They chose not to publicize it, right? And the only reason this is being brought up is because they want to prevent Trump from moving ahead with any negotiations with North Korea. That's what's going on here. And there's a lot of good people that are sharing this story and saying, oh, that's awful what the USA did to North Korea. I agree, 100%. They shouldn't have murdered these civilian fishermen. They shouldn't have tried to spy on Kim Jong-un. But, I mean, do you really expect the U.S. government, when they're negotiating a nuclear treaty with some country, don't you expect they're not going to, it's not right? And I don't support U.S. imperialism trying to surveil and monitor the leader of sovereign nations. But do you think that they wouldn't do that? And the fact that North Korea chose not to publicize it at the time, and the fact that this was kept secret from until now, it's obvious what's happening. And then you go to the editorial page and you see the New York Times seething that Trump is negotiating and could possibly get the USA tied into the new economy rising in the East, and could, have distance from Britain and the NATO countries, right? This is carefully timed. This story is carefully timed to serve U.S. foreign policy. I mean, this is about the fight in the deep state, right? John Bolton is the guy who sabotaged the talks with North Korea last time, right? In case you didn't know, John Bolton is the guy who prevented the talks last time, and he is possibly going to prison, right? And John Bolton, he said that Libyan options were on the table. And then also, you'll remember that the CIA then raided the North Korean embassy in Spain. And there was like an attack on the embassy in Spain. So this was John Bolton and his crowd were doing everything they could to prevent peace with North Korea. And now it appears John Bolton may be going to jail, and Trump is back in office and strong, and Tulsi Gabbard is stripping the security clearances of the Russiagators in the deep state. And it looks like we may actually move ahead. Putin is talking with Alaskan companies about joint ventures and building that Bering Sea tunnel and connecting us. And so out of the blue, in case you didn't know, this thing happened. Well, of course. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It's possible they could have made the whole thing up, but it could be true. But why are they bringing it up now? Right? Again, right? This is to prevent peace with North Korea. That's what this is about. And that brings me to the second item, the Hyundai plant in Georgia, right? ICE raided this Hyundai plant in Georgia, right? And Hyundai is a South Korean car company, and they had manufacturing plant in Georgia, and ICE went there and, dragged out a bunch of South Korean employees, roughed them up pretty bad, shackled them, brutalized them. There's some pretty awful videos of this. Now, I don't know exactly what that's about, but I can guarantee you it is related to what's going on with South Korea and North Korea. It's related somehow. I don't know how. This could be people in the ICE agency trying to undermine Trump. ICE, ICE is staffed full of Trump supporters, right? The FBI doesn't like Donald Trump. They tried to prevent him from getting reelected with suppressing the Hunter Biden story, right? Trump put Kash Patel, who is an enemy of the FBI, in charge of the FBI to control them and stuff. So the FBI doesn't like Trump. ICE does like Trump. And it's possible that among some of the Trump supporters in ICE, there are people that are like Marco Rubio. They are fanatical anti-communists, and they really don't want peace with North Korea. And so they did this without telling Trump they were going to do it. They did it unilaterally to cause tension between the United States and South Korea. South Korea is angry about it. That's one possibility. The other thing is that this could be done as a way of pressuring South Korea to go along with Trump on meeting with North Korea, right? That's possible. I don't know. There's been a lot of weird shit related to the USA and South Korea. I don't know if you saw, but Joe Biden indicted Sue Mi Terry, the top advisor to the Obama and Bush administration on matters of North Korea. She is not a North Korean sympathizer at all. She is an anti-communist, a preacher against North Korea, gives TED Talks, all of that. But she was the White House expert on North Korea. And Biden charged her with being an agent of South Korean intelligence. And I believe Trump has not lifted the indictment. She is still facing federal charges of being a foreign agent of South Korea. And the allegation is they bought her handbags or something like that. It was completely absurd. It was one of these Joe Biden Foreign Agent Registration Act things. That's really weird, right? And now, and also the raids on the churches, right? So the government that has just taken power in South Korea came into power on the backs of a guy who attempted a coup. And so now, as a result, all kinds of people are being investigated in South Korea for their ties to the coup. And all kinds of churches are being targeted, including one church that is the most friendly to North Korea of any church in South Korea, and that's the Unification Church, right? I mean, Mother Moon, Holy Mother Han, she received a birthday gift from North Korea, like a golden statue was sent to her. She's visited North Korea. She's, her late husband hugged Kim Il-sung. So, but yet they're investigating them, and they sent police agents to, conduct a raid against them. So there's all kinds of crazy politics going on in South Korea right now. South Korea is heavily contested. Why? Because things are changing. Things are changing on the Korean Peninsula, and they're changing very rapidly. And if things weren't changing, there wouldn't have been an attempted coup. There wouldn't be all kinds of investigations. So the southern half of the Korean Peninsula is in flux. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that China is a major business partner of South Korea, and that it's right there near the Russian Far East. It's right there, near China, and that South Korea built themselves up, and they are a strong country. And please don't think that, and this is a common thing. Oh, North Korea is poor and starving, and South Korea is strong because of capitalism, right? It's not because of capitalism. Park Chung-hee, the military dictator who made South Korea a strong country, he did not use free market methods to do it. He used the military. That car company in Hyundai, that's basically a government entity. The military and the government built Hyundai, and they built POSCO, the state-run steel industry. Park Chung-hee was a military Bonapartist. The USA had to stabilize South Korea as a barrier against communism. And Park Chung-hee was awful, murdered thousands of communists. He, had like prison camps for homeless children. He was an awful guy. But he was also an economic nationalist, and he used the military and the government to build up and stabilize South Korea. And the United States probably killed him. He was shot in the face by the head of the Korean CIA in 1979. And then the guy who shot him in the face, the head of the Korean CIA, never got to state his motives before he was summarily executed by the rest of the Korean CIA agents. But Jimmy Carter didn't like him. And Jimmy Carter had launched the Koreagate hearings against him. So there's something going on in South Korean politics right now. All right. There's a power struggle within the South Korean state because their relationship with North Korea is about to change, and it's about to change for good. Right. The USA and Russia are going to begin trading with each other again. The war in Ukraine is going to end. North Korea is going to sit down with Trump, and that is going to be a huge game changer for the whole world, but especially for the Korean Peninsula, especially for the Far East region, right? Trump and there are people around Trump that want to pivot the United States to the West, away from NATO, away from Britain, away from New England and the old money establishment. There's certain people in the Trump administration who want to do that, and it's a question of how much they're able to do it, but it's already happening. That summit in Alaska was the first step, and Tulsi Gabbard's purge, that was another step. And John Bolton getting his home raided, that's another step. Things are moving very, very rapidly. And there is a big struggle within the deep state of America and within the deep state of South Korea right now. And you have to understand all of that in the context of this, right? And that's why the New York Times has chosen to reveal this story from 2019. That's somehow, I don't know exactly how it fits in with the Hyundai raids, but it's related. You can be sure it's related, right? And the Hyundai raid and the New York Times leaking the story, all of this is related, right? It's all related. And this is all related to the question of how the United States is going to pivot. This is the Yankee and Cowboy War of Carl Oglesby that I always talk about. There's a great book, The Yankee and Cowboy War, right? And the war basically argues that America has two axes, right? You have the ultra rich in New England, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Carnegies that are New York City and Boston and Harvard and Yale and all of that, the old money. And then you have the cowboys, the wealthy capitalists of the military industrial complex that are Texas oil men, that are weapons manufacturers, that et cetera. And they're on the West Coast. And the Republicans have always been the party of the lower level capitalists, the military manufacturers, et cetera. And it has been, the money of the New England establishment and the intelligence agencies that funds the Council on Foreign Relations. And they have always been the liberals, the Atlanticist liberals, right? And Trump, to some degree or other, is pivoting in the favor of the cowboys. He's pivoting the U.S. economy westward. And that's what the Alaska summit is about. That's what his talk about seizing Canada is about. That's what, his talk of the Bering Sea Bridge and his reaching out to North Korea is about. That's what this is about. And you got to not see this in terms of good guys and bad guys. All right. It's not about good guys and bad guys. Trump has done awful things, deporting people for their pro-Palestine views, supporting Israel. Look, we're not trying to tell you that Trump is a good guy. I'm trying to tell you there's a power struggle within the American elite, with the Atlanticist Eastern establishment versus the lower levels of capital versus the Western industrialists. And Trump is pivoting things slightly in the favor of the Western industrialists. And that is to the benefit of anti-imperialism and to the benefit of America. The more our economy gets pulled out of the Wall Street, London financial international order, the more that industry is boosted over the financiers and the Wall Street folks, the more that we're doing business with Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and North Korea and countries like that, the countries the New York Times is really mad about, the more that we're doing that, the more we're going to be able to build the anti-monopoly coalition and pivot the United States out of imperialism, right? That's the future that America can have. And so if we see a nudge in the right direction, we got to take it, right? And that's the thing. We got to be in this fight, right? And if we just sit on the sidelines and condemn, what's the point, right? We got to be in the game here. There are real struggles going on. We could see the Ukraine war end. We could see peace talks on the Korean Peninsula. We could see the Bering Sea Bridge get constructed. Things have the potential to change. We have to nudge them in the right direction. And if you want to be an abstentionist and just beat your chest, be my guest. But I have decided, no, I have a responsibility to make the world better.